If you've been in Christian circles as long as I have, I know you've heard the phrase, the back door, specifically in terms of trying to close the back door. And this is in reference to the fact that every Christian ministry that has pretty much ever existed has had little trouble bringing in new people, occasionally visitors and such, especially during this specific time of the year, and then 6 months from now during the winter between Thanksgiving and New Year's Eve. And the reason for that is simply because Christmas and Easter are, if you want to call them this, the Super Bowls of Christianity. And they're at the beginning and end of the season, more or less, whereas most sports have their big thing, most big series have their big thing at the end of the season. Christianity has one at the beginning and at the end. In fact, the original liturgical calendar used to have its beginning and major endpoints at Christmas and then Easter, and after Pentecost, 50 days later, then would begin what's called ordinary time, in which basically it's almost like taking the summer off, more or less, what many ministries, especially student ministries, have the tendency to do. But in terms of the back door, went to an elders conference this last weekend, in which the subject of discussion was this thing known as the back door, and how that Christian ministries of all types have always struggled with retaining the people that visit. They may visit for personal reasons, they may visit for financial reasons, they may visit for resource reasons, like all sorts of different things, but keeping them. Someone might come forward, sign a card saying that they gave their life to Christ or that they want to learn more, and overwhelmingly the number one thing that will then happen is nothing. There was a guy leading a parachurch ministry resource organization that said that he's done tons of data, combing through stuff provided by Barna Group and Pew Group and Gallup and so forth, that was investigating people that have gone forward, especially in major revival-esque harvest crusade type environments. You know, Greg Laurie's Harvest, or Billy Graham, or youth conferences and conventions, things of this nature. And they would go forward, they would give their personal information saying that they had made some sort of significant spiritual commitment or decision. Maybe it was at worship retreat, or it was a family camp, or it was at some sort of youth event or camp, or whatever. And then they would then be followed up with the next series of questions regarding what happened afterwards. What did you do with that decision? Did it come to any sort of fruitions? And if the person said no, it would lead to a specific set of questions of why. And the number one answer is no one followed up. No one pursued. No one came in behind, essentially, to try and provide care, guidance, or direction. That's the main reason. And the whole session that this guy was giving his lecture, it was basically a strongly worded rebuke of, what are we doing? What are we doing? That they've been netted, right? That if we're fishers of men, and we've gone out, we've brought in fish of every type, now it's time to sift them, and instead of doing so, we've just thrown them all back. The number one reason was no one followed up. There were a few, of course, that pursued anyway because it was in their personality or their wiring or the Holy Spirit's guidance to do so. But one of the major services the church is supposed to fulfill is providing that guidance for Christians, helping them find their way. That's why, in fact, most of the most prestigious universities were founded, was to give, especially men, a pathway to receive the conditioning, the instruction, the discipline necessary for them to serve the church. And then they expanded outwards into the other things they offer now, Harvard Med and Columbia Law and, whatever. So, it's something to consider. What are we doing? Why are we not following up? And it's nearly universal, I'd suggest. Every organization, every church, every nonprofit that is associated with Christian circumstances has struggled in this way of, on the one hand, it's a personnel issue. But on the other hand, it's simply a matter of, it's not very fun. It's not very enjoyable to call people who made an emotionally responsive commitment, and afterwards, in the broad and harsh light of day, now that they've had time to think about it, and be told that they're no longer thinking that, to be turned down. It's not easy. It's not enjoyable. But it is necessary. And Christians have not been very good at this. Elders are more concerned about the buildings and the budgets than they are the butts and seats. Even though butts and seats are the major reason why they tend to fire ministers. Not getting enough people in the door. So part of it was as well a matter of the elders have been too long disassociated, distanced from practical ministry in their churches, specifically with the youngest members, the children and the youth ministries. I don't know how many churches I've served with and for that the council of elders or the board of directors or the whatever it happens to call itself is basically no different than an absentee father of the church. We hear about things that they do. We hear about decisions they have made from far away with no insight, no input from the direct ministry leaders that they are affecting with their decisions. No real interest or regard for how those things are going to consequentially affect those ministers, ministries, and the people that attend those ministries. They just make budget line decisions. And I don't think it's far off the mark to say that that is not God-honoring. They're more concerned about where they're going to buy the next plot of land to build the next massive church building to meet in than they are concerned about the people who will populate it, and that is insane. So what do? The whole purpose of that session, as well as really the entire weekend series, was get in the game. It was for you as an elder, as a leader in your church, and I'm not an elder, I'm just there, I'm just a guy, but you as an elder, you as a leader in the church, to begin taking your responsibilities seriously. Paul told Timothy that it was his responsibility to pass on what he had been taught to faithful men, and that those men were then responsible to pass it on faithfully to others. Most elders simply have not done their part of it. They're not really any significantly different from any other congregation's members in the church that they attend, except that occasionally you might find their signature on a check here or there. Many of them, in fact, don't really attend any of the services that the church even offer. Many of them, they're just this silent third party that is present but not voting kind of weird or situation. It's wrong. Get in the game. You need to be involved. If you are not in the circulation of instructors or classroom teachers of the children's ministry, you're a failure as an elder and ought to be removed. If you are not in the circuit of youth ministers, the ones that are driving the bus loads or van loads of kids to camp and such, then you are a failure and you ought to be removed for negligence. If you are not consistently on the grounds of the church, tightening bolts and screws and replacing light bulbs and scrubbing toilets, then you are a failure as an elder and you probably ought to be removed. You're in violation of what the Bible claims is your responsibilities. And if you are not consistently checking up on the congregation, going door to door and visiting with the people whom you claim to be leading, then you're a failure as an elder and you ought to be removed. You cannot be this distant absentee father that makes these decrees and decisions from a high nested place without any regard for how it's going to be carried out. This is not a military operation. You are not a general. You, in fact, are to be just a captain of infantry leading missions into the lost territory to bring back captives. That's what the role of elders does. And that, quite frankly, you fight how you train. And many elders, they have never been trained, or that they've been trained by the secular world in business sectors how to be a business leader, and they're trying to do that in the church, and then wondering why it is that the church is struggling so much. The church is not a business. It is a ministry. It is a ministry of God. And so it's something for you to consider. If you're an elder and you've been sitting on your hands waiting for someone else to do the things that need to be done in your church, just resign. Resign and let someone else who is willing, capable, and volunteering take your place. Otherwise, let the Holy Spirit convict you and get to work.